Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Reds Rundown podcast, hosted by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob, he's Joe, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Joe, how are you doing? As always, that's the first question we got to ask. Where we got to start with?
The weather is turning, so it's been good.
Mhm.
Excited to be able to go outside more to start watching some baseball. And Rob, I don't know if you know this, but I might be going on a trip to Arizona. Not for spring training, unfortunately, but this summer. So I'm excited to see that. Maybe check out the Reds spring training facility. So we're going to see how that all pans out. But that is some exciting news in the life of Joe.
I love that. That is exciting news. Hopefully, you'll get to go get to Goodyear, see what's going on over there. Maybe the Reds will be in town to play the Diamondbacks. I don't
That's
know
the
if you've
hope. That
checked,
is the
but
hope.
okay, good. Yeah, that's one of the stadiums that are definitely up there on my list because it's Chase Bank, or is it Chase Bank or just Chase Stadium? Maybe I don't remember, but
Chase Field, yeah.
Chase Field. That's right. Wow, got all of the other ones, but yeah, it's apparently an amazing ballpark, one that I've always wanted to get to at some point. But yeah, we've got some exciting stuff to talk about today, Joe. We're going to be only pretty much talking about the Reds' moves today. They made a few. There's a big rumored one that we've been talking about. I think everybody's been talking about because it seems like such a good match potentially for the Reds. But we'll be going over all those moves and everything from the last week. But we're going to start with the question of the day, which is, what grade are you giving the Reds offseason with these new moves? Like I said, they made, I think, at least three. We're going to talk about four, actually five. Now I'm looking over here at our Google Doc, but five different moves here in the last week. So a lot of good stuff to go over, Joe. But we'll get started. Like I said, let me know in the comment section below what your grades are going to be. We'll give ours later. We'll start with a pretty minor move here. The Reds signed Joe LaSorsa, left-hander from the Nationals. He's still only 27. The Nationals had designated him for assignment. The Reds decided to go out and grab him for a minor league deal. He's thrown a lot of innings. His ERA hasn't been necessarily great. His strikeout rate as well has not been all that fantastic, but he does log innings. And he had time periods, stretches, where he was a pretty solid reliever. So I think another chance for the Reds to try and do their magic right, and see if they can kind of turn this man into something of a diamond in the rough. It happens a lot more often for relievers at later ages as well. So sometimes you just need the right pitching coach to tell you the right stuff. So nothing too big here. Other than the fact that he's another lefty in the bullpen. They are going to have plenty of options between AAA and the majors this year for lefties, Joe. We'll be talking about another one here in a second. But what are your thoughts on this one? And then we can probably quickly move on to the bigger names here.
Yeah, I like his signing because 2.81 ERA in the minors for his career is not bad. I think there's something to work with. I wonder about his ceiling and whether he might even be on the Reds at any point, just
Yeah.
based on how things went when he was with the Nationals last year. But no, I think it's a good take a risk on him and see how it goes. You're right. We love lefties, and I think maybe we saw last year about how the pitching staff went down and how much our depth, both hitters and maybe were affected. That we were saying that this year that is not going to be the reason we lose is the depth of the pitching staff. At least I'm still waiting for some more hitters to be signed to maybe be those minor league players who can come up and be those guys. But for pitching, we're definitely not letting that happen.
Yeah, which I appreciate. And, our AAA system last year was pretty desolate, Joe, in my opinion. So sign as many guys who have some major league experience who you think you can work with as possible. And that comes in with another guy who they signed this week, Joe. Old friend and last no-hitter, I believe, for the Reds. I could be wrong on that one, but I'm pretty sure he was the last no-hitter for the Reds. Wade Miley, coming off of Tommy John surgery, already didn't throw very fast, but sometimes you get extra speed, that first year or two after. So pretty interesting signing. I really thought he was going to go back to the Brewers. I thought he was going to get a full, major league deal. It doesn't seem like it. Feels like he's wanted to come back to Cincinnati. He has openly said that at different points since he left, since the Reds, I believe, traded him to the Cubs, if I remember correctly. But Yeah, I mean, he's been great when he's been healthy, especially over the last few years. He had he had those good years in 2018, had a down year in 2020 with us in only a few games, but in the years that he's pitched the majority of the season, he's been really good. His best season, arguably, of his career with a 5.3 WAR, 3.37 ERA, 12-7, really was pivotal in that 2021 team. And at 38 years old, 4 years later, he is making his way back to Cincinnati on a minor league deal. And this is how you can know they're seriously considering a guy as a potential for a roster spot in the future. He can make up to $2.5 million if he ends up getting on the major league roster in the rotation. So really like this signing. Very low cost for them, and I think a very high upside kind of guy. Where he could be a number 4 or 5 starter if you really need him, and I think he'd be very good on this team. I just don't know, to be honest with you, Joe, I just don't know if he's going to end up making it on this team. I think they may end up letting him go somewhere else, but if he does accept the accept the assignment for AAA, then that could be extremely good depth for this team.
Yeah, I think this was a good deal for both sides. He's going to be age 38 season this year. This is a guy who, 5 years ago, good. I don't know what to expect coming off of the Tommy John. I don't know what to expect coming off of his age. Just a guy who never really relied on the speed and power, so that gives you some hope. He has an opt-out in his deal, so if he doesn't like the situation, he can opt out, which is good for him. But also, I think, good for us because we don't want to have too many number crunches going on.
No.
He will not be ready, they don't think, until May, so some of the season will already happen. So maybe it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, we're in May and we've had 2 pitchers get hurt. Now Wade Miley becomes something we can actually use, and he wants to be here, and that's good. So I don't mind the signing because it's cheap. I think anyone hoping to get Wade Miley from back when we had him in 2021 might be overreaching a little bit. But that is like, if we get a guy who can give us even a 4 ERA, or even give us 2 or 3 good outings before maybe we have other people come back from injury, that might be in and of itself worth it. So just excited for him to be back as a person, but I'm keeping my expectations low just based on the age, the surgery, and the pitching staff cluster we have.
Yeah, and I could see him being a guy who's in the clubhouse as well, even while he's recovering, and being a good locker room guy. So definitely love that, and I feel like he would probably love to work with Terry Francona, as I don't believe he has had a chance to. He was in Boston in 2015, but I think Terry Francona was definitely gone by then. So, yeah, we'll move on though to the bigger signings. Joe, Austin Hayes coming to the Reds, 1 year, $5 million. A lot of people are going to go back and look at last year, which was a disaster season for the man, but he still, even while battling a kidney infection, multiple injuries, was still able to bat .255. The season before, .275 with a .769 OPS. He's not much of a walk guy, not necessarily the biggest strikeout guy, but he'll strike out a decent amount. But 16 bombs, 67 RBIs may not seem like a lot, but 36 doubles. A lot of those home run numbers go up when you're not playing, in Camden Yards, where the Baltimore Orioles play. So I really like this signing. I think that unfortunately he is probably the guy who they wanted to, like, the right-hander that we are going to get for this season. And I don't think that that's the worst thing. I mean, this guy's had a 3.2 WAR, a 2.4, and a 2.5 the last 3 seasons that he's been healthy. So he will add value. Like, he is a Jonathan India type hitter, I would say, like, at least WAR-wise. You're getting kind of that value in him. And for only 1 year, $5 million, there's a real shot I could see this guy hitting like 25 home runs in a ballpark that actually gives up home runs and being a pretty nice piece to this team. I don't know exactly where he's going to fit in the lineup right now, but I do expect him to play every day. I think that, you could probably pencil him in with TJ Friedel to be out, probably in the outfield, but, there's a chance this guy could get some DH time as well. But he can play all 3 outfield positions. He's a much better corner outfielder than he is a center fielder, though. He's got a cannon for an arm as well, so that'll play well, I think, in right field specifically. But where are you at with this guy, Joe?
So Rob mentioned last week that his second favorite team was the Yankees. Mine is the Orioles, and not saying I cheer for them that much, but
Yeah.
I think it's fun to have a rooting interest in each league. So I've had a little bit of experience with them. I do like him as a player. I think that Camden Yards moving the fence in did have an impact on his power numbers.
Hmm.
Most homers he's had in the season was 22 before this. I think he can maybe push 25 to 30
Yeah.
with the Reds, and especially if he's healthy. As you mentioned, he went through a lot last season. And as he went through a lot and didn't have his best season, he wouldn't have qualified for batting average title or anything, but like he would qualify as he would rank fifth on average for the Reds, and that includes people who only had 7 games played, like Austin Wynns, who was our leading batting average guy. So if you give him a lot of at bats, I expect him to be very helpful for this lineup. And again, the power numbers might be up, but I expect his average to be up a lot more now that he has a full season. He doesn't hit righties all that well. He hit 203, I think,
Hmm.
or maybe last year against righties. So we'll have to get that number up, but he creams left-handed pitching, and that's something that we have struggled with a lot. So if he can fill that role against lefties and even be a guy that he usually starts against righties too. So if he can get that back up, that's a very valuable addition. Rob, you and I talked off air earlier this week. Yes, like the guys on that are still arbitration eligible and all that like they might be on the best deals, but for a guy coming in as a free agent, this guy might be the steal of the year because he is only making $5 million, and if he is healthy and with the ballpark and working with Terry Francona, I could see him hitting 280 with 25 to 30 home runs. And if you just look at our roster last year, we would kill for someone like that.
Oh, it'd be
So
huge. He'd be our best hitter.
yeah, so I'm excited for this one. I think just to kind of put things in perspective, I think it's a good move, not like the great move we were hoping. Like, yeah, you could end up being the MVP, but I think we were all kind of like hoping to get that big right-handed power bat, to get that maybe more of an established star. But I do like him as a player. I do like the move. And it stinks that like that happens, and now people like John Heyman are writing like, oh, the Reds could be in play for Pete Alonso. We're not in play for Pete Alonso. No.
No, no. There'd have to be some other things that would need to happen. I'm sure that we are in play. Whether or not that's going to actually happen now. I will say, too, for fans who may have some PTSD, this is not a Will Myers type of signing either. This guy is... Will Myers was very good for a time, no doubt, but we were definitely catching him on the tail end. Austin Hayes just had an injury, like a random injured system or season, right? Like that kidney infection apparently really messed with him. It was causing him to forget like mid conversation what he was talking about. Like his legs were apparently just super sluggish. He just could not do very well, and he still hit 256 during that time period, which again on this Reds team would be very good. I would not be surprised to see this man hit 270 plus, driving in some runs, eventually being potentially like a middle of the order type of guy for us and providing a lot of value, honestly. I would not be shocked to see this guy have potentially his best WAR season. And I think the Reds, for their credit, even though I hate this mindset, they also got him on a 1-year deal, Joe. So if he's hitting the crap out of the ball and the Reds are out of the, contention, they can trade this guy very easily. I would say more accurately, I could see him having a Brandon Drury type season for the Reds, just in terms of production. I could see this guy easily, like I said, hitting 20 home runs plus and doing some good damage in terms of the RBI numbers too, and maybe that'll even convince him to want to stay with the Reds for an extra 2 years. Maybe they do an extra year with an option for a third year in the offseason or something like that. So great stuff, in my opinion, here. The next one was a trade with the Giants, which was a surprise to me, Joe. I think a surprise to you as well, because the Reds basically gave up nothing. And they got Taylor Rogers, the big 6'3 lefty from the San Francisco Giants. 2.4 ERA last year, Joe. I've heard and I've read plenty about the fact that his speed numbers are going down, all that kind of stuff. I get that, but 3.83 ERA, 2.4 the next year. This guy has some of the most holds in baseball. He's a really good setup guy. His BABP number, BABIP numbers, are a little bit lower than what you would expect for somebody, and in that regard, it's actually kind of a worse thing, like good and bad. There are people who expect that, that number would generally go up for a pitcher. Feels like he got a little lucky, is what people are trying to say in San Francisco, but I don't really care. He's been solid, and a lot of these pitchers learn how to throw even without speed. And I think he's one of those guys who's been able to do it. And if nothing else, he gives you a very experienced guy who I think is going to be able to go out there on a consistent basis. I mean, if you look at his games, Joe, from his first season, 57, 69, nice, 72, 60, 66, 60, 64. He had a couple seasons of injury there in the middle, 2020, 2021. But other than that, man, this guy is going out there for basically a 30-year games every season and throwing the ball well. So the Reds, by the way, he's got $12 million salary, but they had the Giants pay $6 million, like a $6 million salary dump, and the Reds get a good reliever for nobody. I love this move. This is an A-plus type of move for me when they can do stuff like this.
Yeah, I like the move. I'm wondering how all the lefties in the bullpen are going to work out now.
Yeah.
I assume this means we carry 3. We probably have 4 candidates for the 3 spots, and I just wonder who the number. Alex Young's probably going to be the guy who gets crunched out of that, which is
For
fine.
sure.
He's if he does pitch as well, that's great, but I'm not expecting much out of him. I like the move. I'm wondering. For me personally, I think some of his bad years, at least one of them was like when he gave a lot of home runs. So in this ballpark specifically, keeping the ball down. The last couple of years he was in San Francisco, so he was able to keep the ball in the park a lot more because that is a big mammoth of a park with that big right field wall.
Yep.
As a lefty, that means a lot. So I like the move. It definitely helps our bullpen. And I'm just like, for me, it's like keeping the home run numbers down. How did the numbers in the bullpen kind of flesh out? Does he still have enough speed, velocity to get the job done? I don't try not to overreact to that, but I do think that he has enough in the tank where I think we might be talking to him at the end of the year as like a 3.3 ERA guy, which would be perfect for us.
Yeah, I compare this to Sean Marshall. I see they throw kind of similarly, and the Reds went out and did that kind of a move with the Cubs. It cost them a lot more back then, and I don't think this is the same caliber of guy as Sean Marshall was when the Reds went out and got him. But I do think that he's a strong, big lefty that will eat some innings and be consistent for you as a setup guy. I think that's what they're hoping for. I'm a little sad they weren't able to get Carlos Estevez. The Royals did pay a pretty penny for him, but I really feel like the Reds could have used him as another option because I'm still a little wishy-washy on Alexis Diaz, to be honest with you, Joe. So we'll have to see if that's going to play out to anything. But that's all for what the Reds actually did. There was one more thing we needed to talk about, Joe. There was a report that came out that the Reds were looking at Luis Robert Jr. very seriously, and that up until they made all these signings, it actually seemed like the Reds were probably going to get the deal done, is the way it sounded, but they just couldn't come to the right numbers and prospects. Edwin Arroyo was apparently part of this deal. And I think Chase Petty is what the other name that I had heard was being thrown around. I want to give everybody a quick reminder. Luis Robert, even in his bad season that he had last year, 224 average, 14 home runs, 35 RBIs. The season before is really and truly his only good season. He's had other okay seasons. It was his only one where he played more than 101 games. He's had a 98 and a 100 season. But even in like a 68 game season in 2021, he had a 3.6 ERA. So you know that the talent's there, but 36 doubles, 38 home runs, and 80 RBIs with a 264 batting average for the White Sox in 2023. He's really their only good player left that they haven't traded off for, something basically. And I think the problem is they're running into this issue where he is a good player if he's healthy, but the problem is he's never healthy. And I do mean never. He had one season that he finished with 145 games. He just can't stay healthy. If he does, then he's very good. And if not, then and I think that that's probably where the Reds balked, to be honest with you, Joe, is I just think for the amount of prospects that they were wanting and the money situation that they just weren't willing to do it. I think that's when they pivoted to Austin Hayes, but apparently the door is still open for Luis Robert Jr., and I would be interested to see how that would work. But we've talked about it a little bit before, but how has your opinion changed since the Reds have started to make other moves and now we have an idea of what the asking price was?
Yeah, I don't mind the asking price. I think that was fair if it is Edwin Arroyo, Chase Petty, and maybe some lower level prospects.
Yeah.
Because the guy does have talent, right? And
Hmm.
we don't know what Edwin Arroyo is going to be. We don't know if he's going to come up and be Noelve Marte, where he's struggling. We don't know what's going on. We don't know if Marte does play well. Does Arroyo even have a spot? Like
Yep.
that's the bad news of everything. If we have so many young prospects, so many young players who came up that we just don't know what the situation is. For Luis Robert individually, I do think it's still the Reds trying to get players on the cheap, and that is on the cheap in terms of contract, not on the cheap in terms of the trade value. So
Sure.
that would be something to watch out for too. Like I, because of his down year, because of his injuries, this would be another one where I'm kind of like, yeah, it's a good move, but do we really get the most out of him? Does this get the Reds to the playoffs? Does this like the big bat that we wanted? I would say no, right? It's not that guy because of all those things. But the talent is there where if you did get him, he could outperform exactly what we've talked about. And working with Terry Francona, who has seems to have magic with his players in terms of young players, and Luis Robert, 27, so maybe not the youngest, but you players who can reach their full potential. I think it could be really good move if they end up doing it. I would still be like hunting for more if I were the Reds. Like they're not going to. Don't get me wrong, but I'd be hunting for a star. And Luis Robert made an All Star game in 2023,
Yep.
but you can't really call him a star because he just never is on the field. Part of it might be the White Sox organization. There's been times where people say he's kind of checked out because the White Sox are so bad. And honestly, maybe his stats last year would be a little bit better too. Not just because of injury, because there was no protection in the lineup. They got rid of
Hmm.
everyone they could have last year.
Yeah.
So there is that fact that he could outperform what we give up for him. So in that regard, if this is the best we can do, if we have no more budget, if Nick Kroll has said this is probably the team we're going into with camp, but like if he has no more money to spend, this is the move you do. If it's hey, we actually have more money to spend, like yeah, then go get Pete Alonso, which is not going to happen. But go get someone like that who could really help this team. This guy, it's like yeah, he might help this team, but he also might play 56 games and not be valuable at all. So
Yeah.
we love the move. Like the fact that we're trying to test it out and see what would work. Didn't mind the value of it, just even though we don't know what Luis Robert's going to do, just we don't know what the other prospects are going to do and whether they're going to have spots. So I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this. I wish they would go, hunt for bigger stars. I know they're not going to, so this is probably the best that we could probably do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, I mean, I'll tell you, if Pete Alonso's willing to do a 1 year, like $15 million deal or something like that, the Reds should be knocking on that door right now because he does. You add him and all the other pieces they've added. You expect McLean to be healthy. You expect Ellie to take a step forward. I think I've said this to you even last year. If Tyler Stevenson's your worst bat in the lineup, then you have got a pretty good team. And I think if you add all those pieces, you probably end up moving Steer maybe even to third base, right? Candy becomes maybe your DH. I don't know, or you just have Alonso do DH, put Steer at first, and figure out what you're going to do at third base. I don't really know, but I will tell you, like Joe and I tried to do a number crunch last week, and after all these moves, and it's tough. I mean, we don't know. It came down to Will Benson and Stu Fairchild for me for that 26th man spot. And Joe reminded me, you can't forget about Cooper Bowman, who we talked about last year, who the Reds got in the Rule 5 draft as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces. I appreciate the fact that the Reds, I know it's like almost inconsistent, but it's like they're just trying to find value. And even if the move necessarily doesn't like fit the perfect puzzle piece, if they think that guy's going to add value, they go and get him, right? Like Taylor Rogers. Did they necessarily need another lefty? No. But did they need a guy who could reliably come in the eighth inning? Yeah. So would we have preferred that to be a righty in that situation? Probably. But is Taylor Rogers probably going to be able to get it done? I would hope so, right? So yeah, Luis Robert would move somebody out for sure, and it would be an interesting thing to watch and see what the Reds would end up doing with him because he would be injured pretty often. So they probably would try to make sure they retained Stu Fairchild to be available should Luis Robert go down. But I mean, if you're going to tell me an outfield of Luis Robert, TJ Friedel, and Austin Hayes isn't like pretty solid, like potentially top 15 at least, right? I would say you're crazy. Like that would add a lot of value. The team would be much better. But if you could also, like you said, go get Pete Alonso and have him hit like 45 home runs this season, because I feel like in a small ballpark, that man's pop-ups would be home runs. that could be really fun too. So I want to see the Reds go out. They've got a little bit of money left, I think. Not a lot, but a little bit. And if somehow Krall could go out there and convince, these greedy owners, whose names I'm not even going to mention on here, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I said that in a bad way, but whatever. My point is that if you want to go convince the owners to go give you a little bit extra, hey, I need $5 million more, right? Then do it, right? Because that would be they would make that money in jersey sales alone from Pete Alonso coming to the Reds. So I would just say that, and hopefully it would work, but. Gosh, man, I just can't imagine how good this team would be if they could go get somebody like him. And even if it was just for 1 year, I think that they'd be in a really good space. And I think that the Reds would easily make their money back, especially if they go to the playoffs. I mean, you get a series in the playoffs, bro. That's worth all the money, all that money right there. You'll make it back in a TV deal. So.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this too, Rob. The Reds have really botched the DH position since it became in the National League. Getting someone like Pete Alonso fixes that. I don't think they play him at first base. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, Jamer's pretty bad in the field too, and they play him first base a lot too. So I don't know how it would shake out, but he would figure to be like an old school DH where the power is there and something that it seems like Terry Francona likes. Obviously, is Boston days with David Ortiz, having a guy like that who can kind of bring the power and not have to worry about the defense at all. Like that'd be really nice. So for a team that is just terribly adjusted to the new rule. I don't know. Maybe this would be a good move for him to do. And you're right. Like, yeah, the TV deal stuff comes into effect. They got $10 million extra than they thought they were going to get. Is that enough to go get someone like that or to get someone else? I don't know. It is frustrating to be a Reds fan and have young pieces we think in place, the manager in place, but feel like there is something missing. Maybe one big star, one big hitter. So I don't know what the constraints are. You're right. I think Nick Krall has done a good job of getting talent. It's just not enough with the budget he has to make a big push. Now, this year, we're going to talk about offseason grades here, so maybe I'll save this. But this year, maybe there is some potential to do a lot better than people thought. But I don't know. They're still far and away. Like, you can't convince me this team is going to win a World Series. They might make the playoffs, but that's just kind of how things are. If you get one more star, maybe you can convince yourself that Ellie takes a huge step and like everything happens. I'm very hopeful that they can get that done. I'm hopeful that Terry Francona can break another curse, but the roster doesn't really make me believe that. So
yeah, the roster is full of a lot of solid but not above average guys, right? Like I think you've got Matt McClain if he's healthy. I think you got Ellie. I still think Tyler Stevenson's above average at catcher, for sure, at least bat-wise for me. And I think you've got a great pitching staff. But the rest of your lineup, is TJ Friedel going to be able to stay healthy and be that guy that got MVP votes in 2023? I don't know. Is anybody going to be able to step up at either of the corner infield positions and outfield positions? I just really don't know. I think can Gavin Lux be like, I don't want to forget about Gavin Lux and Austin Hayes. Like they're solid guys without a doubt. And I think in a weird way, like they combine and you have an all-star type of player, right? And I think if you get the best out of both of them, they are potential all-star players. We've seen that happen, but like, yeah, they need a guy who you can feel like is consistent, who could do it. And like, I'm looking at Pete Alonso's numbers. I mean, even hitting in New York, right? Like 46 home runs in 2023. Dude, this guy could hit 60 home runs in Cincinnati. It's that big of a difference. Like would he? I don't know. But I mean, he had 53 obviously in his rookie year. Can you imagine, Joe, if this guy came here with the ability to hit 50 home runs already, and you don't think he could add another 10 just being here for 90 plus games, or for 80 plus games, excuse me. So like, I don't know. I mean, it could be an interesting thought. We'll have to see what happens. I'm really interested to see what happens with Alonso because I was almost certain he was going to go back to the Mets. Then he wasn't. Then he was going to be. Now he's not. So I really don't know what's going to happen with him. But it feels like if somebody just comes in with a relatively high AAV and gives him a 1-year deal, maybe even with an option, then I think he might take that. So we'll have to see. I mean, another guy as well who we haven't talked about at all. I don't think the Reds are really in contention for because he's looking for like a 6-year deal. But Bregman's also a very interesting piece that I would have loved to have seen. I mean, if the Reds had even a modest payroll of 150 million, they could easily go out and get one of those guys. But I don't know. Maybe they are saving up all their money for Ellie. Maybe that's the goal. They're going to just bank as much money as possible to keep Ellie forever.
Yeah, I don't know, but it is getting later in the year. I know we talk about how free agency sometimes extends to like spring training and stuff, and like a lot of these players maybe don't want to be there day one of spring training because it is a hassle to go through an extra month with the long season ahead. But we have some big names still out there. We have pitchers or catchers reporting by the time we record next week's episode, right
Yep.
around then. So this is definitely interesting and definitely leaves some options available for the Reds to go make moves. Who knows if they actually do? It seems like Nick Krall said they're pretty much done until camp starts, but at least there's some hope out there if you're trying to keep some hope alive.
Yeah, I would say that's just talk for now. I think if a great deal came along, I don't think he's going to say no. I think he'll figure it out if he can. So, yeah, man, we'll hop into it though. I think it's time to talk about off-season grades. Last time you gave, what was it? Did you say B plus? Was that what it was? Okay,
B plus.
And I gave a B. I was kind of in the B minus range. I want to know. I'll let you start here. Where do things shape up with the addition of Austin Hayes, Taylor Rogers, and I'm going to put Wade Miley in there as well because I do think that's a very savvy move for the Reds.
Yeah. So just for reference, last time we talked about it, I gave the Reds I think a C for the players they acquired.
Yes.
But it also gave them an A or a B plus for having Terry Francona, and that speaks to how much I love Terry Francona. I think he's one of the best managers in baseball. I think you move it up to A minus now, and that is still leaving on the table that they didn't go get the big piece that we wanted, but they did improve this roster. They got value, um, you know, with ownership's constraints. That's pretty good, and that can factor in too if you want. But to me, that's like if ownership was better, I think they could have hit an A or A plus for us, and they could have gotten that star that we wanted. But with the financial constraints, that's just not realistic. So A minus is mostly built up into Terry Francona. I'd say that players move themselves up from a C to a B because I do like Austin Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Taylor Rogers. I do like that we have depth this year that we didn't have last year. So there's a lot to be happy about. You think about it, A minus. I kind of expect that to be maybe like plus 10 wins, right?
Yeah.
I think 5 or 6 comes from Terry Francona. The rest come from maybe the improvement of players. I can see the 87 wins. That would not be good enough to win the division last year. The Brewers won 93. But I think it puts you firmly in the can't compete for the playoffs. Probably right on the edge of making the playoffs. Don't know if they're going to win a playoff series. Don't know if they're really going to compete in the postseason. I think that's, that is a big jump. 10 wins is a big jump in Major League Baseball, too. But I think the thing that kind of leaves it from being a perfect grade or anything is just they didn't go get that person. And I think it's just mostly ownership doesn't allow Nick Krall to go do that. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think I said almost verbatim in the last time we did this that if they went out and got a right-handed outfielder that was solid and a reliever of some kind, a high leverage reliever, that I would give them an A or like an A minus. I'm gonna put up to an A just based on the constraints because I do think Terry is just that good. I do think players, I'd probably still go B minus B. I just do think that managers matter a lot more in baseball than they do in a lot of other sports, like more than people realize. I should say more accurately, not more than like a head football coach or a head basketball coach necessarily, but just more than people realize. I think managers can do a lot, not just for the clubhouse, but I think a lot of the strategy and the day-to-day stuff. And I do think that we've seen examples, including Terry Francona, of managers who can get the best out of players who then kind of just fall off, right? Like, that first, World Series for the Red Sox, there were guys like Doug Minkiewicz who were just coming out of, not nowhere. He had been doing some stuff in Minnesota, but came out and actually, like, really, really contributed and made a name for themselves, right? There are guys who had their best years under Terry, and I don't think that that's necessarily an accident, right? And I think that he's put together a good staff. So I'm happy to bump it up to an A because I really believe that this coaching staff will help get the best out of these young players. I think a lot of them as well will be heading into their third seasons. So that'll give them, third or second season. So they'll have, a lot more at bats and things under their belt. They'll know how to get through slumps a little bit better, all that kind of stuff. They'll be continuing to improve on their abilities. And I think that this offseason, they've addressed basically everything that we've been looking for other than a star player, Joe. They have. I mean, they have added value where they needed to. They went out and got a really good arm. Like, I can't emphasize enough. I think Brady Singer is going to be a really, really nice under the radar addition. I think Austin Hayes and Gavin Lux will be as well. Somebody on MLB Network gave the Reds an A for their offseason, and it was almost purely based on Terry Francona, and I think you and I are kind of in that same realm. Otherwise, yeah, I probably would have given it a B, but I just think a better manager, I think better players, more consistent players as well, right, is a big deal for me. I think Austin Hayes, Taylor Rogers, and Gavin Lux, and Brady Singer, they've all shown to be consistent. They may not be superstars, but they're all pretty consistent, and you kind of know what you're going to get out of them, and they're going to be better than what we've had. I mean, our batting averages were so bad last year. Just the two bats alone, I think, are going to add a lot of depth to this lineup. And I'm very excited about the fact that we have to argue about who's going to get those last like two spots in the outfield, essentially, and those being players who were starting almost every day last year, who've now been pushed off. I think that's when you know you've got a good roster. And I don't want to leave off Jose Trevino either. Great addition as a backup catcher. Really solid addition. So I do think Krall did the best that he could do with what he was given. I think the only thing keeping this from being an A+, like you said, is if they had gone out and gotten like a really big, consistent star. I think Austin Hayes can potentially provide a lot more value than people think. I think Gavin Lux can, because he's going to get a chance to play every day as well. And I think Brady Singer can, again, be a really, really good guy. I like this roster. I just want one more, and I'm really hoping at this point that at the trade deadline, we're going to get that star, and I think that that's where this money that's going to get saved and other things are going to be, and I think that could be what pushes them over.
Yeah, I think this still, like, it could be an A+, but this roster, the way it's constructed, still puts a lot of pressure on Terry Francona to get the job done. And I do think he can do it. I do think he's one of the best managers, but you're talking about him having to, in my opinion, you get some new guys, but fix a lot of what went wrong last year in one season, if you're trying to do it this year. That's a lot. Like, getting Spencer Steer to up his average, getting Matt McClain back healthy and in a rhythm.
Yeah.
Is Noelvi Marte or Christian Encarnacion Strand anything for us? Like,
yeah.
Are they going to give us anything this year? There's a lot to figure out. Is Will Benson still a player? Is he not? Does he like Will Benson from his time in Cleveland with them, or does he not? Like, there's so much to figure out and so much on Terry Francona's shoulders that it's not fair. And I will sit here and defend Terry Francona no matter what he does, pretty much, for this whole season, because I think they're putting so much pressure on him.
Yeah.
And most of my grade is built up in the fact that he is here, and the pitching staff and like the coaching staff both are here with him. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and I will go nuts if I see Reds fans talking bad about Terry Francona when I think he's still very severely hamstrung by the financial constraints and the fact that they just don't have those bats.
Yeah.
Because, again, some of those guys, I think we all expect them to take a step forward, but some of them might just be not good Major League Baseball players. If that happens, you're asking Terry Francona to get something out of people who, I guess, aren't going to give you that. Like, it's just not going to happen. So,
sure.
A lot to be figured out there. And, yeah, like what you said, I like this roster. I like the moves they made. It's better than last year's roster, pretty objectively, I think. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and a lot of players who didn't step up last year who need to step up to get to even the point that I was talking about, like 87 wins. That's going to take a lot of work from these guys.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I'm excited to see it. I think I think not every guy will take a step forward, but I think that there will be a few guys, we're trying to ask him to fix like 8 people, right? I think if we can get 4 of them to be fixed and be better, then I think that that's really good, because those last guys are either going to be off your bench, and you'll be getting guys like Rhys Hines who can come up and maybe be something, like, Edwin Arroyo to come in and fill those spots. Like, they've got the depth now to be able to replace those guys, even with other young guys, and give them a shot. So you're giving him a chance to, cycle through these guys and find the ones that'll work. And if you can get 4 of them to be good, solid, everyday players, You add that on to Ellie, you add that on to McLean, you add that on to Stevenson, you add that on to TJ Friedel, Austin Hayes, Gavin Lux, and you're sitting there and you've got 11 to 12 really solid baseball players who will be, shuffling their way in and out. And I think that'd be great. So, yeah, I think we are going to wrap it up here. Joe, do you have any words of wisdom before we sign off?
A couple of news and notes here. My parents saw Terry Francona at a tribute concert that was down at the Madison Theater. They think.
Oh, okay. It seems
So
like a
that was
place he
pretty
would
cool. I'm
be.
glad he's getting involved in. Yeah, they're glad he's getting involved in the Cincinnati community, and they were like, "Hey, can you show us a picture of him? Do we think it was him?" And they're like, "I think it was, but who knows? Could be my parents being crazy." But either way, glad he's getting involved in Cincinnati. Two, we have Barry Larkin attempting to get the Major League Baseball franchise in Orlando. I
Yep.
will help you out right now. That is not happening. They have
Nope.
two franchises in Florida that cannot draw fans.
Yep.
And maybe Barry. I don't know if Barry wants to be more involved because he's not as involved with the Reds. He's an announcer, but he wants to be more. He wanted to be considered for manager. He wants to be considered more. So I don't know if that's the reason, but Orlando ain't happening. And then I saw, one of my favorite things to do, and I know Rob you do too, is go on Reds Reddit and kind of check out what people are talking about.
Yeah.
There was Brooksgate talking about the most valuable MLB trade assets, and they had Ellie De La Cruz 6. But I think this list is crazy because they have Shohei Ohtani at 9. And I know he's older than some of the guys who are ahead of him on this list, like Ellie. But I think you get the most return from Shohei Ohtani still. Maybe Bobby Witt probably gets a little bit more too. But that was crazy to me. So while it is fun to see Ellie De La Cruz be in the top 10 in that list at number 6, I would say just be careful of where you're getting your sources from because I don't think it's logical that Shohei Ohtani is the 9th most trade value. I think he could get almost anything you want for that guy. So fun to have it, but just be careful where you get your stuff from.
I think it has to do with contract too, so that might be part of it. When I saw the list, that's what I thought is, I think based on future value and contract for a trade, I don't think that Ellie's out of the realm. I think the thing is we still don't know if for sure Ellie is going to be that guy, right? Like he's had, 1.25 season essentially of being like, or well, I guess 1.5 seasons of being a solid Major League Baseball player. I know he's electric, right? The one thing we didn't talk about, he did get the cover of MLB The Show along with Gunnar Henderson and Paul Skeens. So, really cool for Ellie to be getting all that attention. They also had a new MLB like claymation commercial I saw with Ellie popping out of the TV and stuff and talking to people and like running around everywhere. So that was really cool. But I want to be careful before anointing him because I love him and he is very fast and he's going to steal a lot of bases, but he still has a lot of things that he needs to polish before he's even a Bobby Witt Jr. like trending player, not where Bobby Witt Jr. is now. So got to keep that in mind.
MLB The Show cover, I don't know if you mentioned that, but MLB
Yeah.
The Show cover. So
Yeah.
well, he is sharing it with 3 people, so it's not as fun as it would be.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It was Gunnar and Paul Skeens, right?
Paul
So
Skeens,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
They made a good choice. That's like if you're going to try to get
Mm-hmm.
the new generation of baseball in there, get 3 of them on there and get 3 totally different players. To be honest.
Oh, absolutely. Outfielder, infielder, pitcher. That's kind of where they went with, right? So, or no, Gunner's shortstop, right? It's Gunner shortstop. Okay, so double shortstop, but whatever, that's fine. I always get those Orioles players confused, to be honest with you, because they all kind of look the same and hit the same and all play all the different positions.
Well,
but
just to defend you, Rob, not that you need defending or anything, but they're kind of like the Reds, where they have a million people who play the same position.
yeah,
So like they have a lot of shorts, Jackson Holiday, and then the Gunnar Henderson. So Henderson plays shortstop and third. So he's a very good player.
he's an extremely good player. Had one of the best first halves to a season that I've seen in a while. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff coming for the Reds. I do love that trade value thing. I thought that was really cool. Reds fans should get hyped. I think Ellie can be a top 15 potentially baseball player in the future. So we will have to see if he takes that major step forward this year or if it's going to be the year after. But even if we only have him for another 5 years or whatever it is, or 6 years, just enjoy him while he is here for sure. And then we'll worry about that once his free agency starts to loom ever more closely. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for us on this episode of Reds Rundown. So with that, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.